At dawn on June 28, 1762, a 33-year-old woman in a borrowed officer's uniform rides at the head of 14,000 imperial guards to arrest her own husband, the Emperor of Russia. She is not Russian. She has not one drop of Russian blood, no legal claim to the throne, and 18 years earlier, she arrived in this country as a minor German princess whose family could barely afford her travel wardrobe. By nightfall, the empire of the Tsars will belong to her without a single shot. Frederick the Great, reading the reports, will sneer that the emperor let himself be driven from the throne like a child being sent to bed. The woman is Catherine, history will add, the Great. This is the story of how a foreigner with nothing stole the world's largest empire, in plain sight, with its full applause. She was born Sophie in 1729 in a drafty provincial house in Stettin, daughter of a minor German prince who worked, essentially, as a garrison commander for the King of Prussia. Europe was full of such princesses, pedigreed, penniless, and stocked like inventory for the royal marriage market. Her one asset was a distant family connection that put her name on a shortlist in St. Petersburg, where the Empress Elizabeth was shopping for a bride for her nephew and heir, Peter. In 1744, aged 14, Sophie was summoned east with her mother, on borrowed money, into a court that spoke French, prayed in Russian, and trusted no one. Understand what she was walking into: a foreign teenager married into a xenophobic court, whose only function was to produce an heir, and who could be shipped home, or worse, the moment she failed to please. Everyone at that court saw a pawn arrive. The pawn had other plans. What Sophie did next is the whole method, and she started within weeks of arriving. She threw herself at the Russian language, getting up at night to repeat vocabulary, pacing barefoot on cold floors to stay awake, until she caught pneumonia and nearly died. And while Russia's doctors feared for her, the story spread. The little German girl had made herself sick studying Russian. Her mother wanted a Lutheran pastor at the bedside. Sophie, gasping, asked instead for an Orthodox priest. You could not buy publicity like that. She converted to Orthodoxy with genuine theatrical grace, took the Russian name Ekaterina, Catherine, and marked every Russian feast, kissed every icon, learned every custom her husband openly despised. Note the contrast she was deliberately building, because the court noticed it every single day. Peter, the actual heir, born German, stayed German, drilling his servants in Prussian uniforms and sneering at everything Russian. Catherine, born German, was becoming, visibly, devoutly, more Russian than the Russians. 18 years of that, while an unloved marriage rotted around her, and she read Voltaire, Montesquieu, Tacitus, an education in power, self-administered in a gilded cage. In January 1762, the old empress died and Catherine's husband became Emperor Peter III. He then staged one of history's fastest demolitions of a throne. Russia stood at the point of final victory in the 7 Years' War, its armies in Berlin's suburbs after years of blood. Peter, a lifelong worshipper of Prussia's king, simply gave it all back, signed peace, offered alliance, and put on a Prussian uniform to celebrate. The army felt betrayed. Then he moved on the church, mocking the liturgy, threatening monastery property. Then the guards regiments, the pampered household troops in the capital, learned they were to be sent to fight Denmark for his ancestral German duchy. And through all of it, he humiliated Catherine at state dinners and let it be known she might be replaced by his mistress, and their son declared a bastard. Read that list again as a checklist: army, church, guards, wife. In 6 months, he had converted every pillar of Russian power into a stakeholder in his removal. Catherine did not have to manufacture a conspiracy. She had merely to be its obvious beneficiary, the pious, Russian-speaking, wronged mother of the heir, standing right there. The trigger came when one of the plotters was arrested. At 6 in the morning on June 28th, Alexei Orlov, brother of Catherine's lover, woke her at her summer palace with one sentence: "Everything is ready, it is time to get up." She rode to the Izmailovsky regiment, then the Semyonovsky, then the rest, and the scene repeated like a ritual. Soldiers swearing loyalty, priests blessing, crowds cheering the little mother Matushka in her guard's uniform. The church proclaimed her, the Senate confirmed her. Peter, dithering at his summer estate with an army of toy-drilled Holsteiners, was presented with an abdication to sign, and signed it. Days later, he was dead in his guard's custody, officially a sudden illness, universally understood otherwise, never traced to her order. Frederick the Great's verdict stands. He allowed himself to be dethroned like a child being sent to bed. But invert the sneer, and you have the real lesson. Nobody fights for a ruler no one identifies with. The guards did not think they were installing a German princess. They thought they were rescuing Russia, because for 18 years she had made herself what Russia looked like in the mirror. A usurper with no bloodline needs legitimacy, and Catherine manufactured it from the most fashionable material of her century, the Enlightenment. She wrote to Voltaire, the most famous intellectual alive, and turned him into her one-man public relations bureau in Europe. And when she learned that the philosopher Diderot, editor of the great encyclopedia, was so poor he had to sell his library, she made the single most elegant soft power purchase of the age. She bought the library at his price and left it in his house in Paris, appointing him its salaried librarian with 50 years of salary paid in advance. Europe's intellectuals swooned on cue. The empress of the knout and the serfs was suddenly the philosopher queen. And sometimes the performance was real. In 1768, with smallpox killing 500,000 Europeans a year and inoculations still feared as devilry, she had herself and her son inoculated first, publicly, to force the example on her nobility at personal risk, as state policy, decades before vaccination. She drafted her Nakas, a legal manifesto quoting Montesquieu wholesale, too liberal for the Russia of its day to enact. When Diderot finally visited and pressed her to apply the philosophy for real, her reply drew the line that ruled her reign. "You write on paper," she told him, "I have to write on human skin." The skin she wrote on was vast. 34 years of reign, and the map itself is her monument. Crimea annexed in 1783, the Black Sea coast opened, new cities, Odessa, Sevastopol, planted like flags. Poland partitioned off the map entirely in 3 cold slices, with Prussia and Austria, some 200,000 square miles added in the west alone. When a Cossack named Pugachev raised the greatest serf rebellion of the century in 1773, claiming to be her murdered husband, she crushed it, and the enlightened correspondence went on while the rebels hung in cages. The serfs, whose condition her Nakas had lamented, ended her reign more numerous and less free than ever. The philosopher queen paid her supporters in villages, and villages meant souls. And in the Winter Palace, the girl who had arrived with a borrowed wardrobe assembled the hermitage, thousands of paintings bought in bulk from under the noses of European kings, and wrote her own epitaph as a joke. "Here lies Catherine, born in Stettin, who came to Russia with nothing." She died in November 1796, at 67, still on the throne she had taken in a morning. So what did Catherine know? Galileo, last time, learned that power does not ask is it true, it asks who decides. Catherine solved the puzzle from the other side. She made who decides choose her, by mastering something rulers born to thrones never have to learn. Legitimacy is not in the blood. It is in the mirror. An empire follows the person in whom it recognizes itself, and recognition can be built deliberately, piece by piece. The language studied until it nearly kills you, the faith embraced in public, the uniform worn at dawn, the wrongs suffered visibly. She had no claim, so she became the claim. Every native-born rival assumed belonging was theirs by birth and spent none of the work. The outsider, who could take nothing for granted, outbelonged them all. That is the outsider's secret, and it has never expired. The ones born inside the walls never learn where the doors are. But her story keeps its own cold ledger. The mirror was for those who could look in it, and millions bound to her supporters' estates were not asked what they recognized. Next time, another self-made outsider, a backwoods lawyer who lost election after election, was marked as a baboon in the newspapers and held a nation together by refusing to stay down. Abraham Lincoln. Subscribe and step into the minds that made history.